Welcome to the CareerJitsu podcast, where we connect the art of Jiu-Jitsu with your career. Our mission is to empower and inspire you with engaging conversations and valuable insights from people just like you who benefit from the shared relationship between your workplace and the art of Jiu-Jitsu, leading you to a more fulfilling and successful life. Hello, and welcome to the CareerJitsu podcast. We are so excited today. We have an opportunity to speak with a blue belt in BJJ from San Diego, California. His name is John Luna. John is a high school social studies teacher. He's been teaching for 15 years, and he's been doing jiu-jitsu for 4 or more years. He will get into that as we start here. But he is going to connect his profession of being an educator with the art of jiu-jitsu. So we are so excited to hear all of this valuable insight we are going to get from John. Thank you, John. Thanks for coming to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Our pleasure entirely. And I am so excited to have John on the show because he's basically living in a parallel universe to me. We're both blue belts. We both teach. We both teach students of all different levels. So this is going to be really, really exciting for me. I know I'm going to get a lot out of this, and I know that we're going to be able to ping pong a lot of ideas back and forth. So, John, let's get started with what got you interested in becoming a teacher, and what are some of the things you love about being a teacher?
I think all teachers have a similar origin story, which is this idea of good teachers inspire us to be teachers. And I agree with that, but I also would argue the exact opposite. I've had a lot of bad teachers, and there's a lot of bad teachers out there, unfortunately. And those teachers also inspired me to be a teacher because it modeled what I don't want to be. So good teachers and bad teachers have really inspired me to want to become a teacher. And I took the path, I took the route, I enjoyed it. And if you're going to be a teacher, you might as well teach things you love, which is why I went towards the social studies route. But you know this, Frank. Teaching in a public school setting is not actually what non-educators believe is teaching. It's a lot of classroom management. It's taking care of 32 personalities or 24 personalities or 26 personalities, whatever your state mandates. And then it's teaching. Right, Frank?
100%. And a lot of people definitely don't understand that content is a commodity, delivery is everything, and how you deliver your material and the environment that you create for that to be received is more important. You can't get to the next level. This is not college. We're not just paid to disseminate information. We're paid to meet them where they are, give them an environment that is crisp and clean enough for them to feel safe and secure, give them a pace that challenges them but doesn't overwhelm them. And after we do all that, then we could deliver it in a way that they're going to digest it, which is also another challenge, right?
Yeah, and what's interesting is that's where I throw Jason in here is meeting them where they are. So as a jiu-jitsu instructor, you might have a room of various rank and skill. And I think about teaching and jiu-jitsu often, and it seems so difficult to be a jiu-jitsu instructor because, especially at smaller mom and pops, you don't have a room where it's like 35 white belts who are all the same skill level, all day one, all, same shape, same size, same gender. It's just not a thing because your rooms tend to be mixed, or at least at my academy or every academy I've been to, the rooms are always mixed, right? You got blue belts, you got white belts, you got a guy who's day one, you got a guy who's been training for 10 years or 12 years or 13 years, and you put them all in one room, and then you got to teach something. That is what teachers do every day. But as a jiu-jitsu instructor, that's got to be pretty intense for you. I mean, that's kind of what I've been thinking of for a while.
Yeah, the term that you used when you were talking earlier, dichotomy, that's a contrasting thing, right? So that's contrasting from one aspect to another. I would say the dichotomy of being a jiu-jitsu instructor versus being a classroom teacher would be that on the mats, most of the people that are on the mats, they want to be there, so they're open to learning and progressing. Whereas in a classroom, you're not necessarily getting everybody wanting to be there.
That's true.
So that I would say that's the dichotomy of it. But the approaches probably become different too. Frank being a high school teacher, Frank definitely knows that the makeup of a classroom can be very Very different, very dynamic, right, Frank?
Well, absolutely, and that's what brings me around to I was looking at some of John's notes, and he was talking about adaptability. He's taught kids that are just struggling to get their credits so they can graduate all the way up to AP, which is kids who come in and they're just like, "Here I am, teach me." So AP kids are more like what you have in a jiu-jitsu gym. I'm here. I wanna be here. My mind is open. Let's go, which is in a completely different skill set for a teacher. For kids who, because maybe their home life, they have bigger fish to fry, basically. They're not
Mhm.
worried about your formula on profitability, or they're not worried about the Civil War and the 3 major reasons we had a Civil War, when they're really worried about their safety at home, or they're really worried about their safety in school, or being bullied, or there's drugs in their household, and gun the kids come from widely different backgrounds. And so the job of being a teacher is really like two different careers. When you're dealing with kids who are just trying to graduate, you're not really there. Disseminating your information is secondary or tertiary to teaching them the things like show up. If you just show up, that's a huge win. And you are important and you are unique and you can do this. And let's take it step by step. You're teaching them life skills more than, you know, like I said, the unity of the doctrine of the polity or any of that stuff. You're teaching them life skills. And I'm sure you agree with that, John.
Definitely. So what's cool is kind of, I guess, tying it back to my background. I did come from a credit recovery teaching background, and what that essentially means is for the folks not in education, these are our students who are credit deficient, which essentially means that they failed classes or they're a year or 2 or 3 years behind from getting their high school diploma. So what that means is you could be a 10th grade kid, but you could essentially be 17, close to 18 years old.
Mm.
So I came from that credit recovery background, and then eventually, about 10 years ago, I did switch, and now I do teach college level. So AP would be advanced placement, which is essentially college level kids at the high school level, college level class, college level rigor at the high school level. So I went basically from one demographic to another demographic in my teaching career, and it's been an interesting change. I didn't think I would enjoy teaching kids that were that advanced, to be completely honest with you. And the reason is because coming from the inner city myself, coming from low socioeconomic status myself, and working with those kids, a little went a long way. Teaching a
Mm.
kid some etiquette, how to greet people in the inner city is powerful. Teaching them to look people in the eye and it's not a threat, it's acceptable. And that's how you should react or act with people is valuable to them, right? Helping them in terms of understanding what a high yield savings account is valuable to them. So definitely agree with you on that. I thought I couldn't do that with AP kids, but I still can. It's just you're teaching them different things in terms of their real life skill sets, I call them.
Yeah, and it's a different
Right.
approach, right? I know that, going from teaching kids with credit deficiencies and then jumping into teaching kids that are in AP classes, because that's so different, do your approaches change? So you talked about another big word, pedagogy.
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 John, can you help our listeners understand what that is and how, your approach can be different based on, different types of students that you have?
So like everything in life, right, there's a science to teaching as well. And because of that, that's why we sometimes we would say things like, oh, that teacher isn't good or that teacher is great. And the reason can actually be broken down. We can quantify each teacher through the things they do. And that is A, B, and C make a good teacher, or maybe A, B, and C make a bad teacher, quote unquote bad teacher. And that is pedagogy. It is the science or kind of field of teaching itself. So what we know is we know there are ways to improve your teaching. In terms of addressing the different demographics, I actually believe that that is the same in jiu-jitsu. So what I mean by that is the way I approach a credit recovery kid, what Frank was saying is completely true. And what he was essentially getting at is the problem, or the difficult part, I should say, not problem. But when you're teaching kids from the inner city, and the way we quantify low socioeconomic status is in education every year, parents fill out a form and it says how much money you make in the household. And then based off of the poverty line, a student gets free or reduced lunch, is what we call it. If a student or family is below the poverty line, they get free lunch, then that student would be kind of quantified or looked at as a student who is low socioeconomic status based off of their parents' tax return, right? So if you're in a school where it's 100% free or reduced lunch, that's what I mean going forward. That's low socioeconomic status by America's standards. So when you're addressing a kid like that, you're trying to really help them. You're bridging the gap. Every person doesn't start in the same place, and that's just something I think people should accept. So a kid from the hood, a kid low socioeconomic status, might not have a dad around. He might have 3 or 4 stepdads, or she might have 3 or 4 stepdads, right? And their starting line might not be the same starting line as another kid, a kid in an affluent area or whatever, really, right? That's similar to jiu-jitsu in that when you roll with that person, when you roll with a new training partner, if it's a white belt, you're treating them different than a blue belt. And when you're rolling with somebody who's closer to your skill, you're treating them differently, right? You approach each training partner differently. Maybe you have a buddy, he's one of your favorite training partners, but you know for a fact his right ankle is tweaky right now. You're probably not going for any straight ankle locks or any foot attacks, period, right? It's the same thing in education. And in education, I use the term, you address your demographic. You meet your student where they're at. So with the inner city kids, I'm really trying to help them understand real life skill sets in terms of, hey, consistency over time always leads to results. 1% better. Let's start small. Let's just do this. Get here and get here on time. And this is going to sound weird for like non-educators, but when I say get here on time, 10 minutes early is what you need to do, right? If you're not 10 minutes early, you're 10 minutes late. Teaching that to a 14-year-old kid is extremely powerful. And legally, I'm not supposed to teach that. Legally, I'm supposed to teach, hey, here's the 12.1 state standard on whatever topic. But what Frank is saying is when we teach those things, that's powerful. Just like as a black belt, right? You're teaching your blue belts and white belts something different. But if you had a room full of browns and black belts and purple belts, you're probably teaching them something else. So we do the same thing in education, just like you would do in jiu-jitsu. Just like me and Frank would treat our training partners differently depending on their skill as well.
John, I am sure that your students definitely appreciate you. I love your philosophy about that. I love your address your demographic is such a powerful statement. I never heard it said like that. I think most good teachers do that, attempt to do that as best they can. And that's something you don't really learn in an education. It's something that it's never taught. Like you said, that people are too focused on content when you need to address their demographic and tell them you showed up on time, and that is awesome. Good for you. You have what you need to be successful, and 1% better every day. And something that I do for my kids once in a while is I was tell them every kid should do some kind of exercise. But if you don't exercise and you just roll out of bed and do 10 push-ups, 10 sit-ups, 10 jumping jacks, and jump in the shower, you're an athlete because you're doing something. That's good enough. You're running circles around people who don't do any of that. And I think that's so important for anybody who's a teacher of anything out there to remember that. Address your demographic and get that 1%. That's a huge win. It's a huge win. It changes somebody's life right
Yeah.
there. I mean, amen to you on recognizing that and doing that for your students.
Thank you,
That's
Frank.
powerful stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I knew we were going to connect. You're a teacher and you do jujitsu, right? Can you
I wish all teachers could be coaches. Sorry, Frank. If all teachers could be jujitsu coaches, it would make all jujitsu academies pretty pretty amazing. Is that
would help a lot and
having that
vice
ability?
versa.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, vice versa too. Yep.
Vice
They
versa,
go
100%.
was definitely a parallel universe there that you can learn from for sure.
So a quick question for you, John. You talked about something that I thought was great, honing your skills by reflecting, which is exactly what you need to do in jujitsu and exactly what you need to do in teaching, no matter what level you're at. Reflect, hone, reflect, hone. Can you talk a little bit about that, both in your jujitsu career and also in your teaching?
So starting with jujitsu, there are guys. I think every jujitsu guy has this. I don't know if as black belts, do you still have this, Jason? But as a lower belt, I see a guy, maybe one of my buddies, he's a brown belt. We can get pretty dirty during our rounds because we like each other, we respect each other. And I know he tries to push the leg into lockdown. I'm passing through the side. I'm trying to make sure that he can't push the ankle in to extend my leg and actually lock me down, right? After that roll, I'm thinking of ways to pass where I don't get caught in a half guard so he can't lock me down. After every roll with every partner, I like to think those of us that are more cerebral at jiu-jitsu are kind of constantly trying to figure out, how do I assess Bob? How do I assess how do I improve against Bob, right? Like, how do I improve against Frank, who loves lockdown? Or how do I improve against this guy who, once he gets a hold of my neck, that's it, right? And I think after every roll, you're constantly honing your craft. You're constantly honing that sword. You're constantly sharpening that blade a little bit, especially against the guys you really love training against, right? The guys that are the goalpost, I guess I would say,
Hmm.
especially as a lower belt. Like, there's guys that I'm trying to kill, man. I'm going after them. But those are the guys I love, right? Those are the guys that I take care of, and those are the guys that take care of me. So you're always honing your edge, your craft against those guys, against really everybody. In education, it's the same exact thing. So I might be teaching a lesson, I don't know, maybe high yield savings accounts or supply and demand or whatever it might be in my 12th grade econ class. I teach the same thing. Like, this is the boring part of teaching, but it's not really boring because you get 32 different personalities a class. First
Hmm.
period, it's going to look like this. Second period, I'm going to iterate so much that second period looks nothing like first period. And by the time I get to sixth period, it's an entirely new lesson. And the reason
Hmm.
that iteration happens is because as I'm going through the lesson, I'm improving. And by the time I get to seventh period, this is, I dare say, a masterpiece, right? In
Hmm.
jujitsu, not just are you doing that after each roll, but you're kind of assessing during each roll, like, hey, the guy subbed me twice, or he caught me twice in, I don't know, some type of, maybe like a 50-50. He caught me in 50-50 and he managed to grab the heel before I could. Or for some reason, my ankles were out closer to him so he could attack, right? Whereas if I kept my ankles closer or tighter to me, or maybe under his hips or under his hips, it would take away his ability to attack, right? We're constantly doing that in jiu-jitsu, and we're constantly doing that in education, in teaching, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, on the mats, I think, that's interesting. I never heard it put that way, but it's really makes a lot of sense as a teacher. Going from one period to the next is very similar to going from one role to the next on the mats. Like say you're working on passing the guard, and you weren't able to pass the guard on the first roll, and then the first roll ends, and you say, "Oh, okay, well, this is why it didn't work." And now you go to the second roll, and you make some adjustments, you revise it a little bit, make some adjustments, and then maybe it didn't work again because something else happened. Now you go on to the third roll, and now you've learned two different things that could happen
Hmm.
when you try to pass the guard. And then, like you said, by the time you reach that seventh period, your guard pass should be pretty good.
Yeah,
And then but like you said, the correlation there is that by that seventh period, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is then by that seventh period, your lesson plan should be awesome.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then next year, when you teach that again, you start from a higher ground.
And you still find iteration, which is crazy.
Always, well,
I've
there's
been,
always iteration, right?
yeah, yeah. So it
It's
still gets
almost like
better.
wind erosion eventually. It just smooths it very
Hmm.
nicely until one day you're like, I just have to change the entire pattern because
Yeah.
sometimes it gets too smooth. Have you ever noticed that? Sometimes you're like, okay, let's like this is so smooth and I've done it so much. I need to change something up. So that happens to me once in a while where I've got this perfect and it's great, but what can I do to shake things up now?
I mean, I think in that instance, you're looking for that novelty, which is okay because you
Yes.
can always fall back onto classical good teaching. But
Right.
sometimes novelty, sometimes a little chaos, throw a little
Is a
wrench in there
good thing,
sometimes.
right?
Sometimes it's a
Right.
good thing. Sometimes it's a
Just
good
like
thing.
with your jujitsu game, sometimes you have a path that's so nice for you, but it's fun to go off it. And a lot of times you go off your path and you get your ass kicked. But
Yeah.
you went off your, and it's kind of fun, right? Because you
Yeah.
learn something new. So
Yeah.
that's always another way to go. Just a quick question for you about, in teaching, obviously, every time we have to teach something new or different or to a different group or different demographic, we fail sometimes. we definitely failed. Like, we know we didn't reach that kid. We know that lesson just, it kind of fell apart. We tried to do a new interactive activity with our kids, and it just, we weren't ready for it. So, and obviously in jujitsu, there's way more failure than we would like in jujitsu. Excuse me. So, have you seen that dealing with failure in jujitsu has helped you in your teaching and vice versa?
So we didn't really get to this in the intro, but I think jujitsu makes people tough. And I don't think that's even an I think. I don't think that's an opinion. I think, especially in gi, when you're getting smothered by a black belt who's just putting that pressure on, it's not a good feeling. It's kind of claustrophobic. And I think it makes you tougher. I think it makes the callus a little thicker, right? And competition has definitely provided that for me even more. And what I mean by that is when you're rolling with the intensity of competition, you kind of, in the training room, it kind of grounds the training room even more, as in it's even more chill, if that makes any sense. It's the same thing for failure in the classroom. Not every lesson goes to plan. And to be clear, I actually teach AP US government and AP macroeconomics these days. For the last 10 years, those have been my core subjects. And in AP US government, things can get kind of rowdy sometimes. And I consider that, as a teacher who keeps a tight class, who runs a tight ship, sometimes that rowdiness for me, I do perceive as failure. But in the grand scheme of things, there are harsher things, right? And jujitsu puts things in perspective in terms of quote unquote failure, or quote unquote, what I like to say, really hard things. It builds grit. Really, jujitsu builds an amazing level of grit. And going back to like the origin story as to why I started jujitsu, it was for my kids. Kind of tied to parenting, but kind of tied to education. I asked myself, how do I teach my kids what I call artificial adversity? So how do you make your kids tough? How do you give your kids challenges? How do you challenge them without, bring them back to where I grew up, right? Like, how do I keep them safe, but still teach them things are hard? You need to learn to persevere because things may get harder. And I think jujitsu is one of those amazing things. Jason, you probably hear that all the time, if in the kids program or something like that, right? But that's kind of where I'm at. And that's really why I started, because then I also said to myself, well, if my kids have to do this thing that's hard, then I need to do this thing with them. And then obviously I could help them as well, which is really what happens with both my kids.
Yeah, I think putting yourself in that circumstance where you have to adjust and you have to adapt. You have this, we talk about a lot, we talk about in jujitsu and with careers about composure. So if you're in the middle of a lesson plan and you have a whole classroom of kids and you expect it to go a certain way, and then it starts to go a different way, you have to be able to keep your composure and be able to adapt that lesson plan to something different in the moment. So sometimes you have to make adjustments in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the difference between revision and improvising. So revision would be like you revising it after the fact in
Yeah.
between periods, and improvising would be like in the moment, you know?
Mhm.
So in jujitsu, thinking with how that relates to jujitsu is that in the middle of a roll, you're always needing to improvise. Something's not going the way you expected, and you have to make your adjustments. And so I think that's a really, really awesome connection there between teaching and jujitsu for sure.
Yeah. And then,
Frank, you're up. Sorry, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I'll add to that. So that was actually, I listed that as a talking point, except I changed it. In jujitsu, it'd be like real-time feedback, right?
Right.
So this idea of, man, I can't get past this knee shield or whatever particular position, right? Well, it's like, why don't I don't have to go through the guard. I can go around the guard, right? I could pummel the fist in. I could try to side smash that half guard, or I could go outside passing, tend to play a no-gi. I'm a smaller grappler anyway, so maybe I can switch it up. I can use that real-time feedback in a jiu-jitsu round and say, hey, maybe I'm going to switch it up. Maybe I'll do some outside passing instead, right? In that improv aspect, you're saying it's beautiful, kind of beautiful term, because that's definitely true in the classroom. And sometimes in the classroom, I say, hey, this is the lesson I'm teaching. And then they ask a crazy question, and I end up spending the next 35 minutes talking about this thing that I had no plan to do. And that's the same thing in jujitsu, but sometimes those are the beautiful moments in both jujitsu and in teaching, which is super cool.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, those are the golden nuggets, the golden moments, and I've done that a lot as well. where we went way off. For example, sometimes I'll just be talking about how to auto pay your credit card every single, just auto pay it. You don't need
Yeah.
any discipline now. It's auto paid. And then the kids will ask, well, what happens if you auto pay, but there's not enough in your bank account? I say, good. You got smacked in the face. You now have a charge of $30 that you have to pay. And now, if you don't have the money, you have to go to your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, or your boss and get some extra hours. But how many people can get out of a $100 hole? Everybody.
Mhm.
But you're never going to get in a deep $7,000 credit card debt hole if you always auto pay because it's done for you. And then they'll ask me questions about, well, what happens to your credit score if you don't auto pay? And now we go off on this tangent about a bad credit score is going to cost you tens of thousands, 50,000, $100,000 over your lifetime, quarter of a million. A bad credit score is horrible. You have to avoid it at all costs. And we start talking about all the ways to easily without discipline ensure a good credit score. And now we spent 20 minutes on that. But tell me, is that going to change somebody's life?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Hopefully
So
one.
that if I always say, whoever uses this knowledge in 10 years, write me an email so I know that I didn't waste 20 minutes of all my classes time. And I've done that for all these years. Now the emails just come in from 10 years ago. So it's really nice that you get that confirmation that you know you're not wasting somebody's time. And that goes back to what Jason just said about improvising. You have to be
Hmm.
willing to improvise and take a
And being
chance.
creative too, right? I mean, I do you feel, John, that your creativity has improved since you've done jujitsu? Like, you know, because you were a teacher before you started jujitsu, so you incorporated a lot of jujitsu mindset into the classroom. Do you feel like your creativity improved with it?
I don't use the word creativity, but I like it. I kind of think of it as like my big picture thinking has expanded because of jujitsu, because now I'm trying to constantly think of other solutions that are, and this is tied to another a point I had, which is efficiency. So like as a black belt, you're way more efficient than a spazzy lower belt, right? Like myself, I'm probably doing things I don't need to do that. You know what I mean? For you, you know the one thing. So I guess for me, it's I've been finding creative solutions to addressing the hard wall. Like why can't I pass? Or
Mm.
why does he keep catching me in lockdown? And I end up thinking of these different solutions. And yeah, it would be a form of creativity, right? And
Yeah,
that's
yeah, creative
definitely
problem solving, yeah.
yeah, and that's definitely helped in the classroom because it's kind of opened my world to, hey, we don't have to think quote unquote traditionally in pedagogy. We don't have to think quote unquote traditionally in terms of my approach to the classroom. There are other modalities or other ways to do things. You just have to be open to the idea that it doesn't have to be the ways that we're taught or the ways we've experienced so far, which is a really good connection. I like that.
And I think that I like your phrase big picture, like you're expanding your big picture. Jason, you often tell us in jujitsu, which kind of what you often tell us is don't get so involved in the small minutia of the techniques. I want you to keep thinking of the overarching principles that are going to help you in any situation to broaden your don't get so caught up in just this technique and this little detail. You need to always keep your mind on the fundamentals and the overarching principles of what makes jiu-jitsu work. And I think that fits so nicely and it dovetails so nicely into what John just said about jiu-jitsu has helped him create a bigger picture, expand his picture. That was a really nice
Yeah.
parallel there. A lot of
Yeah.
parallels.
And looking at the bigger picture, you mentioned earlier, John, about the socioeconomic aspect. Looking at the big picture, like Frank is saying, allows you to be more compassionate, right? I mean,
Mhm.
do you think being a teacher and being a jujitsu practitioner has helped you be a more compassionate person?
So I call it academic empathy. So kind of not necessarily compassionate, I suppose, but you end up I'm highly empathetic as an individual regardless. But in the training room, this is technically a good thing, but I care about my training partners kind of to a fault. Where what I mean by that is, sometimes I'm in a mood for a hard day, but then I'll go with other players so that way I make sure that they get good rolls in, right? Like safe rolls or whatever. Because I am the smallest grappler in the room typically, and that usually means like, oh, I should probably go with other grapplers my size just to ensure that they're getting certain type of role, if that makes sense, right? A technical role with somebody closer to their size than somebody who's 80 pounds heavier than them. So I don't know if I would necessarily call that compassion per se, but in the training room, my goal is always like, hey, I want to be a good training partner. And being a good training partner means a couple of things. One thing, obviously, is prevent injury or make sure that doesn't happen. And then two, for some people, it means not too much aggression or rolling as technically as possible, right? So jiu-jitsu has definitely taught me that individualistic compassion per each training partner for sure. In the classroom, we do that by default because it's such a diverse set of personalities. In the classroom, and also I love that, Jay. I didn't think about this, but I do that. When I do train my training partners, even if they're a higher belt or a higher rank, I kind of in my head, even if I catch them with something, I'm kind of like, I don't know what Bob did yesterday. Like, he probably just came off a 12-hour shift. You know what I'm saying? Like, I probably shouldn't get arrogant or be like, whoa, I got 3 subs today. Like, I do consider that either empathy or compassion in the sense of like, hey, I don't know where they're coming from, So it's the same thing in the classroom. Sometimes you have a kid who's just a jerk, right, Frank? Or they seem to be a jerk. But in reality, what you didn't know was they haven't had a meal in the last 24 hours. They get their food from the
Correct.
school lunch. They get free or reduced lunch. They're worried because their parents their mom's working 2 jobs, but they actually haven't had a meal. Or this morning they had a bag of hot Cheetos for breakfast and they're going to go to school and get real food. So like, you don't know with your training partners where they're coming from, but it's the same thing with your kids. That Timmy's not a jerk. He just hasn't had a meal in 24 hours and his mom
100%
hasn't
true.
seen him in 3 days because she's working 2 jobs minimum wage just to make ends meet. So it's the same parallel. And I like that you brought it up that way. I didn't think of it as compassion necessarily, but it's totally true. That's a good term there.
100%. And I like a kid can be acting like a jerk, but kids are really never jerks. They're too young to be jerks, right? They're dealing with their issues and their problems. And one of the techniques that I have that has served me, if anybody's a teacher out there, this is one of the best techniques that has served me so well. Anytime a kid is being a quote unquote jerk with their behavior towards you kindly ask them to step outside. Hey man, what's going on? Is it something I said? Is it something that I did? And they will always say, no, no, like I'm sleeping out of my car. They'll say something like that. You'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. What happened? And like, ah, just a lot with my parents or whatever. And you're thinking, yeah, of course this is not personal. They have something and they will always tell you if you don't call them out in front of their peers, right? You don't fire back at them because you're in a position of authority. You just ask them to go outside. Go outside. They open up and then you're like, damn, how can now you have a problem to solve and you help them solve that problem and then you can't believe how well they behave in your class after that because they know that you care, right?
That's that empathy, right? And this is
That is
more
empathy.
teaching than jujitsu, but the reason Frank takes him outside, the reason a good teacher would take him outside is because if I address the kid in front of his 6 little buddies, his 6 little homies, he has to save face and he has to demonstrate that he's tough. He has to be the alpha and he has to prove that to him and his friends. But once you take them outside, they get to be themselves, they get to be vulnerable, and they get to be honest. And that's why Frank says take them outside. For you non-educators, that's the reason we would do that. And
That's
it
it.
really disarms them. And then once they kind of realize, so this is kind of tied to jujitsu as well, right? Using real-time feedback, or improv actually, which is a better term here. That kid who came off as a jerk, when you take him outside, he's expecting you to chastise him. He's expecting you to come hard, right? But like,
Right.
what you're really going to do is you sit him down and you say, hey, what's going on, dude? Is everything good? You're normally not like this. And all of a sudden, he
That's it.
realizes you care. But in jujitsu, it's the same thing. I can't pass this way. Maybe I'll try a float pass. Maybe I'll try something different, right? So you switch your approach, especially against the training partners you're with on a regular basis. I'm gonna try something crazy. I'm gonna
Right.
improv. I'm
I'm
gonna
gonna
do
do a
something
cartwheel
different.
pass here. Yeah.
So that's more my wheelhouse right there. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Good
making
stuff.
that connection, on the mats and off the mats, like, in your, um profession, whether you're a teacher or any career, when you can make the connections with people, and you can connect to them and make them understand that you view them as a person and you understand them as a person,
Mhm.
they're so much easier to teach. I experienced that on the mats with, a lot of, most of the time it's a white belt that maybe is struggling. Most white belts that come in and start learning jujitsu, it's a tough sport. And white belts, you got to really take care of them. And I experienced that a lot with white belts. I try to connect with them on a personal level first because I want them to understand that I care about them as a person. And then when I do that, it opens their mind up and they start learning so much easier.
Mm.
And that applies on the mats for me, so I know for sure that must apply for you in the classroom as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, Jason, we have
It's a lot of
a
good
lot of
stuff, right?
great value
Do you
here. Yes.
Frank, can I ask one more question?
Of course, of course.
Sorry, I just had one more before you, because I don't know if you're ready to do some takeaways or not, but let me just at least get this one in. I thought about this too, and this is kind of a question of both of you because you're both teachers, right? So it's
Mhm.
really a question of both of you. Do you find that it's helpful for you to get help not help, but get feedback from other teachers? Like you sometimes see students that are in other classrooms and have other teachers, not just you, right? Because they're rotating to you. So do you find that communicating with other teachers about students really helps you to be a better teacher too?
So looking at a kid holistically, so getting the perspective of other teachers is extremely valuable. I have had an incident, kind of like what Frank is talking about, where I was a younger teacher at the time. I've been a teacher for 15 years. I actually started at the age of 25. And, when you're new and young at teaching, the things that Frank and I are talking about, you're not actually taught any of that. None of that is formally taught. You learn all that on the fly. And what happened in that particular instance was I did talk to a kid one on one, but I did it in the classroom. And this was always a good kid, always a good kid. He got in my face that day. So I took him outside and then we talked outside, and then he was the greatest kid ever. But essentially, you're right in that I talked to another teacher, his English teacher, and she told me that something must be going on at home. He's been standing outside in 2 other classrooms, so 4 out of his 6 periods, and she decided to call his parent, and lo and behold, there was a little bit of internal strife at the house. And that's exactly what you're saying, like, you getting that feedback from other players, we call them stakeholders in education. Getting that feedback from anyone else who has a stake in that kid is extremely, extremely important, right? And in jiu-jitsu, I kind of think of it as like every training partner is a different kind of mentor, if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
During some guys, I'm playing my B game. For you upper guys, I'm trying to kill you, but I'm learning so much from you upper belts, right? And then some of you upper belts just straight up give me the knowledge. Like you just teach me straight up, and it's like, oh man, I love that. And that is that feedback from others or feedback from other teachers in the context of education, extremely valuable for sure.
I basically concur with everything he just said about feedback. John, you're 100% correct. When you have a student who is struggling either in the classroom or with life, and you reach out to another teacher who has that student, you form a network of people who share information. And instead of having a string that somebody can hang off of, you make a net for that student.
Mm,
Definitely.
that's good, Frank. That's good, dude. That's
Ah,
deep. I love that.
the
Oh, that's
philosophy,
good,
always
man.
about
He has been a
philosophy.
teacher for 30, how long, Frank? 30 years
Since
now you've been
1995, so what's that, 30 years, yeah.
30 years, yeah.
Thir
Man,
35 wait, 35 years? Yeah, yeah, long too long, too long.
in
No, never
90,
too long 'cause I still love teaching. A couple other things. Yes, I think when I started, I had a mentor, which was great. That helped. And then right now, one of my former students is my supervisor.
cool.
And we are like best friends. We have lunch together and we always talk back and forth, just like you would in jujitsu. Hey, what if we try this? Or this kid, have you had this kid? What can we do with this kid? And so I think having that has helped me on a daily basis my supervisor and I always talking about, we talk about it just like we do with jiu-jitsu. Same thing, like, do you think this would work? Do you think that would work? What about a project that does this? Why don't we try to get kids, instead of going to study hall, to take an online class for college? Like, we are always brainstorming. I think that has helped me a lot. And finally, feedback is so important. After every one of my classes, I have my own feedback forms for the students. Do I get ready? Like, when you come in, am I as prepared as other teachers? More prepared, less prepared? Do I go too fast? Do I go too slow? Are my life lessons boring, or do you feel like you're getting something out of them? Do you like the level of vocabulary I'm using? Do you ever feel lost like that? Do you feel like I care about you? Do you feel that I'm too strict with kids? Do you feel that I'm too lenient with kids? Do you feel that I'm too goofy? I'm too serious? Like, I do this whole thing, and at the end of the year, I it's all on Google Forms, so I get pie charts and I
Mhm.
can see. And I know, like, I always cut off the very ends, like, "You're God," or "You totally suck." I know those ends aren't really, I try to look at the standard deviation, the middle of the standard deviation, and then I try to form my practice on that, because 'cause they're really my clients. My students are my clients, and they're pretty honest on that, and I'm
Mhm.
not, "This is not gonna change your grade. You're done. You have your grade." I gotta know to be a better teacher. Please tell me the truth. And so all of those forms of feedback inform me on the next year on how to be a better teacher. Because if you're not going up, you're going down.
Nice. That's
Yeah.
that 1% better. That's that honing the edge. I do a Google survey at the end of every semester as well. It's fully anonymous. I teach AP government, so I ask for, "Hey, where do you think I am on the political spectrum?" Because I keep it as extremely neutral and as objective as possible when I teach. So I tell them, "Hey, where do you think I'm actually at?" And it's always a good feeling when they put me dead center, because it's like, "I got you
I
guys. I got both
cannot
sides."
I cannot tell you, John, how much I respect that. I cannot tell you how much I respect that, because I'm a true believer that our kids should not know who we voted for, if we're leaning left, leaning right, right in the middle. It's none of their business to know that. And especially because you're in economics, right? Because you're in
Mhm.
economics, you have Adam Smith, you have Karl Marx, you have free market, you have socialism, and you should present each model in the best way that you can. Talk about some of their weaknesses and let them decide.
Mhm.
Good for you
Yeah.
for not getting on your pulpit and trying to mold the political ideology of your students. Kudos to you for doing that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, what I
Yeah.
do is I actually present the traditional or typical left response, and then the traditional or typical right response, and the rebuttals to one another. And then I just say, hey, the only reason I'm providing those traditional responses is so that when you go out in the real world, you kind of see like, hey, uncle who has a really strong opinion, that's going to be his argument, right? That's going to
Right.
be
It's
his
not that he's
stance.
evil or ignorant. It's not that he's an evil or ignorant man. It's because he truly believes that taxes will go to to help the people.
Mhm.
Whereas maybe Aunt Sophia is not a greedy person, but she thinks the trickle down is actually going to help the people. You
Yeah,
decide which one's true, though, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
And
man,
those principles apply to the mats too, right, guys?
Mm.
100%.
Yeah.
100%, especially with people's games and the way they decide. Just like John said earlier, like, he was always, like, in his strategy was to play guard, and he had a whole strategy about that. There are so many benefits to doing that, and there's so many techniques and games you can play from your back. But now he's got a totally different philosophy of being, I'm going to guard pass, I'm going to stay on top, I'm going to use my top game. Those are like liberal and conservative right there. Seriously, they're so different in everything. And then also how you how you address different partners in the gym. How do you address them? What's your philosophy of addressing this person? Where they're new and they're older and you know they have joint problems, you're going to totally have a philosophy that actually works with that person. Where when you go against Big Juan, you can't use that philosophy. You're going to use a totally different philosophy, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Strategy. So,
Different body
yes,
type.
Yeah,
different body types.
I feel like educators, like, are the hardest people to teach because they don't necessarily listen that well, but they are the best learners. So, like, they in the moment, they kind of like they're used to always teaching. So now they have to listen to somebody else teach, right? So now they're like their brain is off somewhere else, right? But then after they roll, they are able to take feedback very well. They're able to take criticism really well. They're able to be creative and, use that improvising and revising concept that we talked about to become better rollers. So I feel like even though they don't listen as well, they actually are very good learners.
You know what's funny about that is I feel attacked. I hate to admit it, but I'm that guy where once we clap, I'm like, wait, what? You go first. I don't remember the technique he just taught.
Yeah, oh, I know.
You're
I
not
see it.
right.
I
I'm
see it all
that,
the
I'm
time,
the,
John. I know you.
and I love the tech. I love the tech. I do. I
Right,
love the
right,
tech. It
right.
was a great tech. But like, I'm not gonna lie. I zoned out for like 30 seconds, and sometimes 30 seconds is enough. And then you're right. I do love the feedback. We
But
got
then
one of our black belts. He's got this weird brain where like we could have a 6-minute roll, and he'll after the roll, he'll be like, so around this time you did this, and then you did that, and then you did, and he would provide feedback like every 30-second increments at the
Oh,
after the roll's already over.
boy.
He's got that weird mind. It's wild to me. But you're right.
Mm,
I love it. I
mm.
want you to tear me
Yeah.
down, dude. Give me all the criticism you can because
Yes.
I know it's making me sharper, baby. Hurt me. Hurt my
That's it.
feelings because I'm
That's
getting
it.
better.
Nothing like teaching in jujitsu makes you more humble, right? Jujitsu makes you humble, teaching makes you humble. They're two things that like, wow, I got a lot to learn.
yeah,
Both of them.
and you always say, Frank, that that as a teacher, you are also always a student. You say that all the time.
My students teach me a ton. They always say, "Thanks, Mr. D. Thanks, Mr. D, for teaching me all this." I'm like, "Thank you. You taught me as much as I taught you." They do. You made me better too, and you kept me young, which is great. So, what you give is what you get, and what you get is what you give.
You're
Karma.
young because you're on the mats, Frank.
On
That's
the
why you're.
mats with a bunch of beasts trying to survive. That's what it is. Survival, right?
Yeah. All right, let's
Wow.
get some
Wow.
takeaways, Frank.
I have too many takeaways to fit in because John, you gave us first of all, you're a very good communicator. You got a great vocabulary. I like the way you frame things. Really, really good. You
Thank you.
should write a book. You'd be a good writer. All right. Starting from the beginning, I just loved that he said, good teachers inspire us to be better and bad teachers inspire us to be better. That is just a philosophy in life in general. I learn from my perfect academic kids, and I also learn from my kids who struggle. They both teach me. They both teach me. And in my circle of friends, same thing. My friends who are killing it, I learn from them. My friends who maybe are like experiencing train wrecks because of some of their decisions, they teach me exactly what not to do as well. Love that. Another thing that you phrased, you coined so nicely, addressing your demographic. Obviously, on the mats makes total sense. You're going to go up against somebody who's 30 pounds lighter than you and new to the sport. You're going to address that, right? You're not going to
Mhm.
crank a guillotine on that person. But also that carries on to being a teacher, but anybody who has any clients that they serve, you address that demographic, you meet them where they're at. Such an important thing for you to so I loved that you another word you used, which I love, John, the process of iteration. We learn better by constant iteration. Do it again, hone. Do it again, hone. That right there, iterations, should be on the top 10 list of how to get better at anything you want. Your
Mhm.
career, your love life, your marriage, your jujitsu, your Muay Thai, whatever you're doing, the process of iteration, reflect, change, iteration. Beautiful, beautifully stated. Another phrase that I love that you used, artificial adversity, is great because you can't have real adversity all the time or you'll fall apart. You need
Mhm.
artificial adversity. I think jujitsu is tailored for that because you can go 80, 90, 100%, and it's almost like a real fight, but nobody's going to really snap your arm and put you to sleep as long as you tap early and often, as you said. And then Jason, I like the way you took that, you parlayed that into two things about improvising. One line was improvising and one line was revision. I like the way you had those two things about artificial adversity in which you improvise and then you also revise. And then the improvisation allows you to be creative, try new things and think on your feet. That was great. John, you talked about big picture expansion and how jujitsu has helped you as a teacher broaden your horizons and think on a more grander scale from alpha to omega, just really pushing that.
Mhm.
I love that. Another great, your vocabulary is just sharp. It's very clear and crisp because I like the way you said academic empathy and rolling empathy. Two things that make you a better human being to be around and add more value when you're empathetic and put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Let's put ourselves in the shoes of our students, right? And let's
Hmm.
put ourselves in the shoes of our training partners, especially the ones who struggle with it because they're smaller, they're older, they're newer. Be empathetic. Love that. And in the end, the last thing we really wound up with was feedback. Seek feedback from your students. Seek feedback from your mentors. Seek feedback from your peers always. And also give it, right? Because what we give is what we get.
Yeah,
Good wrap up,
That's a
Frank.
that's good.
basket of wisdom right there. And we put a handle on it for our listeners to just take along with.
Yeah, I mean, connecting careers in jiu-jitsu is what this podcast is all about, and being able to like really get some insight on what a teacher handles in the classroom and how they apply it, how they apply the principles of jiu-jitsu in the classroom, and also how things that teachers learn in the classroom, how they can apply them on the mats. This was a lot of valuable insight for our listeners, Frank. And thank you, John, so
100%.
much for your time.
Thank you
Yeah,
guys for
John,
having me.
thank you.
This is a good experience. I really appreciate you guys so much. Thank you.
And we
Yeah.
need to meet you someday. So if we ever go to California, we will look you up. But if you ever come to Massachusetts, you
Definitely.
need to look us up. We will have a few brews, philosophize. That will roll first and then have some brews and philosophize. That would be a great
They
time.
say San Diego's the mecca of jiu-jitsu. There's a lot of there's massive 10P, Legion, Autos. Autos headquarters is
Yeah.
out here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Andre
there's a lot of
Galbao is out there,
So
right?
you're
yeah.
inviting us to the Mecca.
I
Yeah.
think you should check it out for sure and then enjoy the beaches or the mountains
Yeah.
or whatever you want.
Wow. Maybe,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be great? You know what we need to do? We need to do like jujitsu group trips. That would be so much fun. Bring a bunch of our people from here, go to San Diego, have fun, roll with these guys, experience
Maybe
culture.
Career Jitsu is gonna allow that, Frank. And maybe we're
I
gonna
think
start
Oh,
maybe that's what's gonna is going to be conventions.
that
We're working towards
wow
that.
turn
We
into
don't wanna
like a
give away our
reality,
secrets,
like
though.
yeah, okay. This is going to be great stuff. Also, quick thank you to our listeners. We love you. We appreciate our listeners. Our listeners become our guests, right? John listened to our podcast, had a lot
yeah.
to offer, obviously, if you as you've seen. So to our listeners, do two things. Share this to people, especially to people who are not in jujitsu, but can listen. We're packaging up the wisdom that you get on the mats. So anybody in a career in life, anybody facing challenges, send this to somebody who you think will benefit. Share this with somebody. This is great
Yeah.
stuff that's
Yeah. Any
inspiring.
workplace, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, anybody who's in the workplace. So we love our listeners. We love our guests. Thank you so much, everybody. Big hug to all. Bam. I hope you got that through the waves of the internet. And stay tuned.
All right,
Thank
thanks
you
for your
guys.
time, John.
All right. Be good.
Well, there you have it. As we wrap up today's episode, let's take a moment to reflect on the powerful connections we've explored between the art of jiu-jitsu and your career. In your workplace and in jiu-jitsu, you learn to adapt and navigate challenges. So remember that persistence and the courage to embrace the lessons that you learn are the keys to your growth both on the mat and in your career.